The blazing sun beat down upon the dusty auction block as Brielle Winters clutched her infant son to her chest, tears streaming silently down her dirt-streaked face. It was 1877 in the rough-hewn frontier town of Redemption Creek, Colorado, and Brielle had never imagined her life would come to this, being sold to the highest bidder alongside her 3-month-old baby. "Next up, folks," the auctioneer called out, his voice carrying across the town square where curious onlookers had gathered. A woman and her infant, 23 years old, healthy enough though a bit on the thin side, can cook, clean, and sew. Baby comes with her, can't separate em on account of the little one still nursing. Brielle kept her gaze fixed on the wooden planks beneath her feet. She could feel the weight of dozens of eyes upon her, but refused to meet any of them. She had once been a respected schoolteacher back east before a series of tragedies had led her to this moment, widowed, penniless, and now facing indentured servitude to pay off her late husband's debts. "We'll start the bidding at $50, the auctioneer announced, adjusting his spectacles. $50 for the pair. Do I hear 50? The silence that followed was deafening. Brielle's heart hammered in her chest as she dared to glance up. The crowd of men, ranchers, shopkeepers, and miners shifted uncomfortably, avoiding her eyes. Some whispered among themselves, others simply stared at their boots. "Come now, gentlemen," the auctioneer tried again, his voice taking on an edge of desperation. $40 then, she's educated, can read and write, would make a fine housekeeper. Still, no one raised a hand. Brielle felt a fresh wave of humiliation wash over her. She was unwanted, a burden, not even worth the lowest bid. Her baby whimpered, sensing her distress, and she gently bounced him, pressing her lips to his downy head. $30. The auctioneer's voice had fallen to almost a plea. 25. The silence stretched on, broken only by the distant barking of a dog and the creak of a windmill turning lazily in the hot afternoon breeze. Brielle closed her eyes, wondering what would happen to them now. Would they be thrown into the street, sent to a poorhouse? The baby's father had died of pneumonia before he was even born, leaving behind nothing but debts and a tarnished family name. "Well then," the auctioneer said with a sigh, preparing to move on, "I suppose we'll have to $100. The deep voice cut through the silence like a knife. The crowd parted as a tall figure moved forward, spurs jingling with each deliberate step. Brielle opened her eyes to see a man standing before the auction block, his broad shoulders squared beneath a dust-covered denim jacket. A well-worn Stetson cast a shadow over his face, but she could make out a strong jawline covered in several days' worth of stubble. "Did you say $100, mister?" the auctioneer asked, suddenly animated. "I did." The man's voice was steady and clear. He finally looked up, and Brielle caught her breath as his intense blue eyes met hers for just a moment before returning to the auctioneer. $100 for the woman and her child. "Well now," the auctioneer said, brightening considerably, "we have a bid of $100. "Do I hear 110? The crowd remained silent, many now studying the stranger with curious expressions, going once, going twice. The auctioneer raised his gavel with theatrical slowness. "Sold to the gentleman in the back for $100. Brielle clutched her baby tighter as the stranger approached, pulling a leather pouch from his pocket and counting out the money for the auctioneer. She caught fragments of their hushed conversation. Papers signed over, 3-year contract, your responsibility now. Her legs trembled as she descended the steps of the auction block, wondering what fate awaited her and her child. The stranger, her new owner, stood waiting at the bottom, his expression unreadable. Up close, she could see he was younger than she had first thought, perhaps 30 or so, with lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of long days under the sun. "Name's August Langston," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "I have a ranch about 5 miles outside of town." "Brielle Winters," she replied automatically, her voice barely above a whisper, "and this is James." August Langston nodded once, then gestured toward a wagon parked at the edge of the square. "My horse is tied up over there. Do you have any belongings?" "Just what we're wearing," Brielle admitted, shame coloring her cheeks. Everything else had been sold to pay her husband's creditors. August frowned slightly but said nothing more as he led her to the wagon. A dappled gray horse stood patiently in the traces, and a smaller paint horse was tied to the back. He helped her climb onto the wooden seat, careful not to touch her more than necessary, then walked around to the driver's side and took up the reins. As the wagon pulled away from town, Brielle stole a glance at her new employer. His profile was strong and weathered, hands calloused from hard work as they held the reins with practiced ease. She wondered what kind of man would pay such a sum for a woman and a baby no one else wanted. Was he kind? Cruel, did he expect? Services beyond housekeeping? The thought made her stomach clench with fear. She had heard stories of women in her position forced into arrangements that made their lives little better than slavery. She held her son closer, silently vowing to protect him no matter what awaited them. "He's a handsome boy," August said unexpectedly, breaking the tense silence. "How old is he?" 3 months, Brielle answered cautiously. August nodded. "There's water in the canteen by your feet if you're thirsty. It's not a long ride, but the sun's fierce today." The simple consideration surprised her. She reached for the canteen with her free hand and took a small sip before returning it to its place. "Mr. Langston," she began hesitantly, "I feel I should know. What will be expected of me at your ranch?" August kept his eyes on the trail ahead, his expression giving nothing away. "I need someone to cook and keep house. The place has gotten beyond my handling since my housekeeper left to marry last spring." He paused, then added, "You'll have your own room, with the baby." Relief flooded through her, though she knew better than to fully trust his words. Men said many things that turned out to be false. "I'm a good cook," she offered, "and I can clean and mend. I was a school teacher before." "Before what?" he asked when she trailed off. Brielle swallowed hard. "Before my husband died, before everything fell apart." August glanced at her then, his blue eyes softening slightly. "Life has a way of doing that sometimes." They lapsed into silence again as the wagon rolled on, leaving the town behind and heading into open country. The landscape was beautiful in its way, rolling hills covered in prairie grass that rippled like water in the wind, dotted here and there with clusters of ponderosa pine and aspen. In the distance, the Rocky Mountains rose majestically against the sky. After about an hour, August guided the wagon off the main trail onto a narrower dirt road. "Langston land starts here," he said, gesturing to a stretch of fence line that seemed to extend for miles. "Been in my family for 20 years. My father claimed it back in '57, built it up from nothing." Brielle nodded, noting the pride in his voice. As they crested a small rise, a sprawling ranch came into view, a 2-story farmhouse painted white with green shutters, a large red barn, several corrals, and a bunkhouse. Cattle grazed in the distance, and smoke curled from the chimney of the main house. "It's larger than I expected," she said truthfully. 15,000 acres, August replied. 2,000 head of cattle, 8 hands working for me, but they stay in the bunkhouse except for meals." As they drew closer, Brielle could see that the house, while substantial, showed signs of neglect: peeling paint, an overgrown garden, shutters hanging askew. August seemed to read her thoughts. "Like I said, it's gotten away from me since Mrs. Hodgkins left. Inside's worse." He pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house and jumped down, coming around to help her. His hands were strong but gentle as he assisted her down, careful of the baby in her arms. "I'll show you to your room so you can get settled," he said, leading her up the porch steps. "Then I need to check on the men. Supper's usually at 6, but whenever you can manage it tonight is fine." The interior of the house was cool and dim after the brightness outside. Brielle blinked, adjusting to the light, taking in the jumble of boots by the door, the stack of newspapers on a side table, the layer of dust on every surface. It was clear a man had been living here alone, with little concern for domestic comforts. August led her up a creaking staircase to the second floor, pushing open a door to reveal a modest but pleasant bedroom. A double bed with an iron frame stood against one wall, covered in a faded quilt. A rocking chair sat by the window, and a dresser with a mirror completed the furnishings. "Bathrooms at the end of the hall," August said. We've got running water, indoor plumbing was my mother's condition for frontier living. A brief smile flickered across his face. There's a cradle in the attic I can bring down for the baby. It was mine a long time ago. Brielle stood in the center of the room, still clutching James to her chest, overcome by the sudden kindness after the humiliation of the auction block. Thank you, Mr. Langston. August, he corrected. Mr. Langston was my father. He hesitated in the doorway. I'll be back with that cradle. There should be clean linens in the chest at the foot of the bed. After he left, Brielle sank onto the edge of the bed, finally allowing the tears she had been holding back to fall. James squirmed in her arms, his tiny face scrunching up as he began to fuss. "SHH, my sweet boy," she whispered, rocking him gently. "We have a roof over our heads. We're safe for now." She hoped with all her heart that it was true. August returned shortly with a wooden cradle, weathered but sturdy, which he placed near the bed. "My father made this," he said, running a hand over the smooth wood. "For me and then for my brother." "You have a brother?" Brielle asked, seizing on the personal detail. A shadow crossed August's face. "Had he died in the war?" "I'm sorry," she said softly. August nodded once, acknowledging her sympathy without inviting further discussion. "I'll leave you to rest. Kitchen's fully stocked, though some things might need replacing. Make a list of anything you need, and I can pick it up in town next week." With that, he left, closing the door quietly behind him. Brielle laid James in the cradle and watched his eyes flutter closed, exhausted from the day's upheaval. Then she moved to the window, looking out over the ranch property, her new home, at least for the next 3 years. Who was August Langston? A lonely rancher in need of a housekeeper, or something else entirely? She had traded one uncertainty for another, but at least here there were walls to protect them from the elements and food to fill their bellies. For now, that would have to be enough. The first few days at the Langston Ranch fell into an uneasy rhythm. Brielle rose early each morning, feeding and tending to James before heading downstairs to prepare breakfast for August and his ranch hands. The men were a rough but respectful lot who seemed relieved to have proper meals again, devouring her biscuits and gravy with enthusiastic appreciation. August himself was something of a mystery. He worked from dawn until dusk, often returning to the house only for meals, which he ate quickly before disappearing again. He was unfailingly polite but maintained a careful distance, speaking to her only about household matters or to inquire after James's well-being. By the end of the first week, Brielle had made significant progress in bringing order to the chaos of the house. The kitchen gleamed, the floors were swept clean, and fresh curtains hung at the windows, sewn from fabric she'd found in a trunk in the attic. She took satisfaction in the work, finding a measure of dignity in making herself useful. One evening, as she was preparing supper, August came into the kitchen earlier than usual, his shirt soaked with sweat, streaks of dirt on his tanned face. "Something smells good," he said, washing his hands at the sink. "Beef stew," Brielle replied. "And I found some dried apples in the pantry, so there's a pie cooling on the windowsill." August's eyebrows rose. "Pie, the men will think they've died and gone to heaven." A small smile tugged at Brielle's lips. "It's the least I can do, considering—" "Considering what?" August asked, drying his hands on a towel. She hesitated. "Considering you saved us from a much worse fate," August's expression darkened. "No one should be auctioned off like cattle, debt or no debt." "And yet it happens," Brielle said quietly, turning back to stir the stew. "How did you come to be in such a position?" he asked, leaning against the counter. Brielle was silent for a long moment, considering how much to reveal. Finally, she sighed. "My husband, Charles, was a dreamer, always chasing the next opportunity, the next fortune. We came west from Boston 2 years ago because he heard about silver strikes in Colorado. He invested everything we had in a claim that turned out to be worthless." She paused, memories flooding back. "He took to drinking after that, borrowed money from men you shouldn't borrow from. Then pneumonia took him last winter, 2 months before James was born, left me with nothing but his debts." August's face remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes. "And no family back east. My parents died when I was 19. I have an aunt in Philadelphia, but we're not close." Brielle shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant though the pain of her isolation was still raw. I tried to make ends meet teaching at the local school, but after James came. Well, they didn't want an unwed mother teaching their children. But you said you were married, August pointed out, frowning. I was, but Charles and I eloped. There was no record of our marriage in Redemption Creek, and by the time James was born, no one to vouch for me. Her cheeks burned with remembered shame. People believe what they want to believe. James chose that moment to cry out from the basket Brielle had placed near the stove, and she quickly moved to pick him up. He's probably hungry, she said, cradling him against her shoulder. I should feed him before the men come in for supper. August nodded, straightening up. I'll tell the boys to wash up. Take your time with him. As he turned to leave, Brielle called after him. August, he paused, looking back at her. Why did you bid for us, when no one else would? A complexity of emotions crossed his face, too quick to read. Everyone deserves a second chance, he said finally, even those society has decided aren't worth the trouble. With that cryptic answer, he left the kitchen, leaving Brielle to wonder what second chances August Langston himself might be seeking. The weeks passed, and summer settled fully over the Colorado rangeland. Brielle found herself growing more comfortable at the ranch, even as she remained aware of her precarious position. She was still, legally, bound to August for 3 years of service, her contract as binding as any prison sentence. Yet August treated her with a respect she hadn't expected. He never entered her room without knocking, always spoke to her courteously, and seemed genuinely interested in James's development. The baby, now 4 months old, had begun to smile and coo, reaching for objects with pudgy hands and watching the world with curious eyes. One evening in late July, a thunderstorm rolled across the plains, bringing with it cooling rain and spectacular lightning that illuminated the sky in jagged bursts. Brielle sat in the rocking chair by her bedroom window, James asleep in her arms, watching nature's display with quiet appreciation. A knock at the door startled her. Come in, she called softly. The door opened to reveal August holding a tray with 2 steaming mugs. Thought you might like some hot chocolate, he said. Storm like this always reminds me of when I was a boy. My mother would make us hot chocolate and tell ghost stories. Brielle smiled at the image. That sounds lovely. I used to be terrified of thunderstorms as a child. August set the tray on the dresser and handed her a mug, careful not to disturb the sleeping baby. And now I find them rather beautiful, she admitted. Powerful, but beautiful. August took the other mug and moved to stand by the window, gazing out at the rain-lashed landscape. Lightning flashed, illuminating his profile, and Brielle found herself studying him, the strong line of his jaw, the slight cleft in his chin, the way his dark hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck where it met his collar. He's growing, August observed, nodding toward James. Yes, Brielle agreed. Soon he'll be crawling and then walking. Children change so quickly. You're a good mother, August said quietly, patient, kind. The unexpected compliment warmed her more than the hot chocolate. Thank you, I try to be. They fell into a companionable silence, listening to the rain and the occasional rumble of thunder. It was the longest they had been alone together since her arrival, and Brielle found herself unexpectedly at ease in his presence. I got a letter from Mrs. Hodgkins today, August said after a while. She and her husband have settled in Denver. They're expecting their first child in December. That's wonderful news, Brielle said sincerely. She must be very happy. August nodded, a distant expression crossing his face. She worked for my family for 15 years, practically raised me and my brother after my mother died. It was the most he had ever revealed about his past, and Brielle treaded carefully, not wanting to break the spell of confidences. How old were you when you lost your mother? 12. Consumption took her. August took a sip of his chocolate. My father never remarried, threw himself into the ranch instead, made it one of the most successful operations in the territory. He must have been very driven. That's one word for it, August said with a humorless laugh. Stubborn as a mule might be more accurate. When Thomas, my brother, enlisted in the Union Army, father didn't speak to him for months, said no son of his would fight in a war that had nothing to do with Western interests. But Thomas went anyway, Brielle guessed. He did, died at Gettysburg. August's voice was flat, emotionless, but Brielle could sense the deep well of grief beneath the surface. Father never forgave himself for those wasted months of silence. And your father, Hart gave out 3 years ago, right in the middle of branding season. August turned from the window to look at her directly. Now it's just me. Well, and the ranch hands, but they come and go with the seasons. The loneliness in his words resonated with Brielle's own isolation. It's hard to be alone, she said softly. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits adrift in the vastness of the frontier. Then James stirred in her arms, breaking the moment, and August set down his empty mug. I should let you get some rest, he said, moving toward the door. Good night, Brielle. Good night, August, she replied, watching as he closed the door behind him, feeling as though something significant had shifted between them, though she couldn't quite name what it was. As summer gave way to autumn, the ranch grew busy with preparation for the coming winter. Hay was cut and stored, cattle were moved to lower pastures, and the house was made ready for the cold months ahead. Brielle found herself fully integrated into the rhythm of ranch life, taking pride in her contribution to its smooth operation. James, now 6 months old, had become a favorite among the ranch hands. Even the gruffest cowboys would make faces to elicit his delighted giggles when they came in for meals. He had begun to sit up on his own and was attempting to crawl, much to Brielle's mixed pride and dismay. He'll be into everything soon, she told August one evening as they sat on the front porch after supper, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. James was on a blanket at their feet, happily gumming a wooden rattle August had carved for him. We should fence off the staircase, August agreed, and probably put locks on the lower cabinet doors. The casual way he included himself in planning for James's safety warmed Brielle's heart. Over the past months, August had gradually become more involved with the baby, sometimes holding him while Brielle prepared meals or reading to him from the newspaper in the evenings. It was a domestic scene she had never expected, but had come to treasure. I've been thinking, August said, breaking the comfortable silence that had fallen between them. Winter's coming and the house will need constant attention to keep warm. It's not fair to expect you to manage everything alone while caring for James. Brielle tensed, wondering if he was dissatisfied with her work. I can manage. I've been trying to stay ahead of things. You have, and admirably so, August assured her quickly. But I was thinking we might hire a girl from town to help with the heavier work, chopping wood, hauling water, that sort of thing, just for the winter months. Relief washed over her. That would be helpful, actually. Good. I'll speak to Reverend Miller when I go into town tomorrow. He usually knows of families with daughters looking for honest work. August hesitated, then added, I thought you might like to come along. You haven't been off the ranch since you arrived. The invitation surprised her. I would like that very much, she said, trying to keep the eagerness from her voice. It would be good for James to see something beyond these fields, too. August smiled, one of his rare, genuine smiles that transformed his usually serious face. Then it's settled. We'll leave after breakfast. The trip to town the next day felt like an adventure after months of confinement to the ranch. Brielle wore her best dress, one of several August had ordered for her from the mercantile shortly after her arrival, and wrapped James in a warm blanket against the October chill. Redemption Creek looked different somehow, less threatening than it had on that terrible day of the auction. The main street bustled with activity, freight wagons delivering goods to the mercantile, women shopping, men gathering outside the saloon. Brielle felt August's protective presence beside her as they made their way to the general store. Mrs. Patterson, August greeted the shopkeeper's wife with a tip of his hat. This is Mrs. Winters and her son James. They've been keeping house for me these past months. The older woman's eyes widened slightly with recognition, and Brielle braced herself for judgment. But Mrs. Patterson merely smiled and cooed over James. What a handsome little man, she said, tickling his chin. You must be proud, Mrs. Winters. Thank you, I am, Brielle replied, relieved by the warm reception. We need a few things for the winter, August said, handing Mrs. Patterson a list, and Mrs. Winters will need fabric for new curtains and such. While Mrs. Patterson gathered their order, Brielle wandered the store, enjoying the simple pleasure of looking at goods she hadn't seen in months. Bolts of colorful fabric, jars of candy, tools, and household items. James babbled excitedly at all the new sights. Choose whatever you like for the house, August told her, coming to stand beside her at the fabric display. And something for yourself and James, too. Brielle hesitated, mindful of her position. Are you sure? These silks are quite dear. The ranch is prospering, August said simply. And winter nights are long. You should have something beautiful to work on. Touched by his thoughtfulness, Brielle selected several fabrics: practical flannel for shirts and nightclothes, cotton for curtains, and a length of emerald green silk that had caught her eye. August nodded approvingly as the items were added to their order. After leaving the store, they visited the church to speak with Reverend Miller about hiring help. The minister recommended a 16-year-old girl named Sarah whose family had fallen on hard times. She's a good worker, honest as the day is long, Reverend Miller assured them, and having a position at your ranch would be a blessing for her family. Tell her to come out on Monday, August decided. We'll give her a trial period before winter sets in properly. Their business concluded, August surprised Brielle by suggesting lunch at the hotel dining room, a rare luxury she hadn't enjoyed since before Charles's death. The dining room was modestly elegant, with white tablecloths and silver cutlery, a far cry from the rustic meals at the ranch. This is lovely, Brielle said, settling James on her lap. Thank you for bringing us. August looked pleased by her appreciation. I thought you might enjoy a change of scenery and a meal you didn't have to cook yourself. They were halfway through their meal when a shadow fell across their table. Brielle looked up to see a portly man in an expensive suit, his face flushed with what might have been anger or too much whiskey. Well, if it isn't August Langston, the man said, his tone containing a sneer. Heard you'd taken in Winters's widow and bastard, didn't believe it till now. Brielle felt the blood drain from her face. August set down his fork with deliberate slowness, his expression hardening. Mr. Holloway, he said coldly, I don't recall inviting you to join us. Holloway ignored him, focusing his bleary gaze on Brielle. Your husband owed me $500, Mrs. Winters, died before he could pay up. That debt transferred to you, legally speaking. A debt that was satisfied by her indenture contract, August interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet. Which I now hold. That contract only covered $300, Holloway argued. She still owes me $200 plus interest. August rose to his feet, towering over the shorter man. Mrs. Winters owes you nothing. Her contract was purchased in full, covering all outstanding debts. If you have a complaint, take it up with the county magistrate. Holloway's face darkened. Maybe I will, or maybe I'll just remind folks around here what kind of woman you've got keeping your house. In a movement so swift Brielle barely saw it, August grabbed Holloway by the lapels of his expensive coat. Say another word about Mrs. Winters, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, and you'll regret it for the rest of your very short life. The dining room had gone silent, all eyes on the confrontation. Holloway's face had turned from red to pale, and he swallowed visibly. No need for unpleasantness, he muttered. Just collecting what's owed is all. Nothing is owed, August said firmly. And if I hear you've been spreading tales about Mrs. Winters or her son, you'll answer to me. Is that clear? Holloway nodded jerkily, and August released him with a slight push. The portly man straightened his jacket, attempting to salvage his dignity, then stalked from the dining room without another word. August sat back down, his face still tight with anger. I apologize for that, he said to Brielle. Holloway's a loan shark, preys on desperate people. He was one of Charles's creditors, Brielle confirmed, her hands trembling slightly as she held James. I didn't know the contract didn't cover his loan. It covered everything, August assured her. Holloway's trying to collect twice, he won't bother you again. Brielle studied him, seeing a new side to the quiet rancher. You were quite intimidating just now, a ghost of a smile touched August's lips. Growing up on a ranch, you learn how to handle predators, human or otherwise. The incident cast a pall over what had been a pleasant outing, but as they drove back to the ranch in the late afternoon, Brielle found herself reflecting on how quickly and decisively August had defended her honor. No man had ever stood up for her that way, not even Charles. "Thank you," she said as the ranch came into view, "for what you did back there." August glanced at her, his expression softening. "No one speaks about my family that way." His family. The words sent an unexpected thrill through Brielle's heart. Was that how he saw them now, as his family? The thought both frightened and exhilarated her, opening possibilities she had scarcely allowed herself to imagine. Winter descended upon Colorado with a vengeance, bringing howling winds and deep snow that transformed the landscape into a vast white sea. The ranch house became a warm haven against the elements, with fires burning in every hearth and the delicious aromas of Brielle's cooking filling the rooms. Sarah, the girl from town, had proven to be a godsend. She came each day except Sundays, hauling wood, helping with laundry, and generally lightening Brielle's workload. With the extra help, Brielle found time to sew new curtains for the parlor and to begin work on a quilt made from the green silk August had bought her. As the days grew shorter, the evenings in the ranch house took on a cozy intimacy. After the ranch hands retired to the bunkhouse, Brielle, August, and James would gather in the parlor. August would read aloud from one of the many books that lined the shelves, while Brielle sewed and James played on a blanket before the fire. It was during one such evening, with snow falling softly outside and the wind occasionally rattling the window panes, that Brielle realized how much her feelings for August had deepened. She watched him over her sewing as he read from David Copperfield, his deep voice bringing Dickens's characters to life. James had fallen asleep on the rug, one chubby hand curled around the wooden horse August had carved for him. They had created a semblance of family, the three of them, in this isolated house on the Colorado frontier. But it was an illusion, Brielle reminded herself sternly. She was still bound by contract, still essentially August's employee. Any attachment she formed would only lead to heartbreak when their arrangement inevitably ended. Yet, as August looked up from his reading to check on James, his expression softening with genuine affection for the child, Brielle couldn't help the warmth that spread through her chest. This complicated, quiet man had saved them from a terrible fate and had shown them nothing but kindness and respect. It was only natural that she should develop feelings for him. "He's sound asleep," August observed, closing the book. "I can carry him upstairs if you like." "Thank you," Brielle said, setting aside her sewing. "He always sleeps better after listening to your voice." August carefully lifted the sleeping baby, cradling him against his broad chest with a tenderness that made Brielle's heart ache. She followed him up the stairs to her bedroom, where he gently laid James in his cradle. "He's outgrowing this," August noted. "I should build him a proper bed soon." "That would be wonderful," Brielle said, tucking a blanket around her son. "You're very good with him." August shrugged, looking almost embarrassed by the praise. "He makes it easy, he's a good boy." They stood together in the dim light of the bedroom, looking down at the sleeping child, and Brielle was acutely aware of August's presence beside her, the clean scent of soap and leather that clung to him, the warmth radiating from his body in the chilly room. "Brielle," he said softly, turning to face her, "there's something I've been meaning to ask you." Her heart quickened. "Yes," August seemed to struggle for words, unusual for a man normally so direct. "Your contract, I've been thinking that it's unnecessary. You've more than proven your worth here, and I don't like the idea of you being bound to me by a legal document." Disappointment washed over her, though she wasn't sure what she had expected him to say. "Are you asking me to leave?" "No," he said quickly. "God, no. I'm saying I want to tear up the contract. You should stay because you want to, not because you're obligated." Brielle stared at him, trying to understand what he was offering. "But without the contract, I'd have no claim to be here, no protection." "You'd have my protection," August said firmly. "As long as you want it, you and James both." The implication of his words hung in the air between them, This was more than an employer offering freedom to an indentured servant. This was a man asking a woman to choose him, freely and without coercion. "August," Brielle whispered, hardly daring to hope she understood him correctly. "What exactly are you saying?" He took a step closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes. "I'm saying that these past months have been the happiest I've known in years. Having you and James here has made this house a home again." He paused, taking a deep breath. "I'm saying I care for you both more than I thought possible, and if you felt the same, I'd be honored if you'd consider staying, not as my housekeeper, but as—" He trailed off, and Brielle held her breath, waiting for him to finish. "As my wife," he said finally, the words rushing out as though he feared his courage might fail. "If you'll have me," joy, bright and unexpected, bloomed in Brielle's chest. "August," she breathed, "are you certain?" "I come with complications, with a past. We all have a past," he said, reaching out to take her hand. His palm was warm and calloused against her skin. "It's the future I'm interested in, our future together." Tears pricked at Brielle's eyes. "People will talk. They'll say you married your servant, that James isn't." "Let them talk," August interrupted, his voice fierce with conviction. "I don't give a damn what anyone thinks except you." He was so close now that Brielle could feel his breath on her face, see the pulse beating in his throat. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he lowered his head until his lips met hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. Brielle had almost forgotten what it felt like to be kissed, to be wanted as a woman rather than needed as a mother or valued as a housekeeper. August's lips were warm and surprisingly soft, his touch reverent as his hand came up to cup her cheek. When they parted, both slightly breathless, Brielle found herself smiling through her tears. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I'll stay. Yes, I'll marry you." August's face transformed with joy, years seeming to fall away as he smiled down at her. "You've made me the happiest man in Colorado territory," he said, pulling her into an embrace that felt like coming home after a long journey. In the cradle, James stirred and whimpered softly, as if sensing the momentous change in his small world. Brielle and August broke apart, laughing quietly. "He has impeccable timing," August whispered. "He always has," Brielle agreed, moving to comfort her son. As she soothed James back to sleep, August watched from the doorway, his expression one of perfect contentment. They had found each other against all odds, a lonely rancher and a desperate young mother with nothing to offer but themselves. Yet somehow it seemed like the most natural thing in the world. "Good night, Brielle," August said softly, reluctantly turning to leave. "I'll see you in the morning." "Good night," she replied, her heart full to bursting with newfound hope. As the door closed behind him, Brielle gazed out at the snow-covered landscape, silver in the moonlight that streamed through her window. For the first time since Charles's death, perhaps even before that, she felt truly at peace. The auction block that had been her lowest moment had, by some miracle, led her to this place, this man, this chance at happiness. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight, Brielle allowed herself to dream of the future, a future filled with love, security, and the family she and James had found in the heart of the Colorado wilderness. The news of August and Brielle's engagement spread quickly through Redemption Creek. As expected, it generated a fair amount of gossip, with some of the townspeople expressing shock that August Langston, one of the wealthiest ranchers in the territory, would marry a woman who had been sold at auction. But August remained true to his word, showing no concern for public opinion. He proudly escorted Brielle and James to church each Sunday, introduced her as his fiancée to business associates, and made it clear to everyone that anyone who disrespected his future wife would no longer be welcome at the Langston Ranch. They planned a simple wedding for Christmas Eve, giving them time to make preparations and allowing some of August's distant relatives to travel for the ceremony. In the meantime, life at the ranch continued, though with subtle changes that reflected Brielle's new status. She moved her sewing from the kitchen to the study, which August insisted she make her own. "My mother always had a room for her correspondence and needlework," he told her. "This house should have a woman's touch in every corner." The study quickly became Brielle's sanctuary, a place where she could write letters, read, or simply enjoy a quiet moment while James napped in the cradle August had moved downstairs. It was in this room, 2 weeks before the wedding, that August found her one snowy afternoon. "I have something for you," he said, looking unusually nervous as he entered the study. An early wedding gift. He held out a small velvet box, which Brielle accepted with trembling fingers. Inside lay a gold ring set with a modest diamond surrounded by tiny sapphires. "August, it's beautiful," she gasped, admiring how the stones caught the light. "It was my mother's," he explained, taking the ring and sliding it onto her finger. "My father gave it to her when they homesteaded this land." Said the sapphires matched the Colorado sky that would always be over their heads. The ring fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her hand. "I'll treasure it always," Brielle promised, blinking back tears of happiness. "There's something else," August said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a folded document and handed it to her. Brielle opened it curiously, then caught her breath as she realized what she was holding. "This is your indenture contract," August confirmed. "Or rather, it was." He nodded toward the fireplace. "I thought you might like to do the honors." With hands that shook slightly, Brielle rose and crossed to the hearth. She hesitated only a moment before casting the paper into the flames, watching as it curled and blackened, the legal bonds that had defined her existence for the past months disappearing into ash. "You're free," August said quietly, coming to stand beside her. "Free to stay or go as you choose." Brielle turned to him, her heart overflowing with emotion. "I choose to stay," she said firmly. "I choose you, August Langston, not out of necessity or gratitude, but because I love you." It was the first time she had spoken the words aloud, though they had been growing in her heart for weeks. August's eyes widened slightly, then softened with answering affection. "And I love you, Brielle Winters," he said, drawing her into his arms, "more than I ever thought possible." Their kiss was deeper this time, filled with promise and a passion that had been carefully restrained until now. Brielle felt herself melting against him, her body responding to his with a heat that surprised her. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. 19 more days, August murmured, pressing his forehead against hers. "Not that we're counting," Brielle replied with a small laugh. The sound of James babbling from his cradle broke the moment, and they turned to find the baby watching them with bright, curious eyes. "I think someone's feeling left out," August observed, moving to lift James into his arms. The child immediately grabbed for August's mustache, a favorite game that always made the rancher wince and laugh simultaneously. "He adores you," Brielle said, watching them together. "The feeling is mutual," August assured her, bouncing James gently. "Though we might need to come to an understanding about the mustache pulling before he gets any stronger." The domestic scene was interrupted by the sound of hoofbeats in the yard. August passed James back to Brielle and moved to the window. "It's Reverend Miller," he said, surprised. "Wonder what brings him out in this weather." They went to greet their visitor, who stomped snow from his boots on the porch before entering the warm house. "August, Mrs. Winters," the minister said, nodding to them both. "Forgive the intrusion, but I felt this couldn't wait." He held out an envelope. "This letter arrived for you at the church, Mrs. Winters. The sender asked that it be delivered to you personally." Brielle accepted the envelope with a puzzled frown, shifting James to one arm so she could examine it. The handwriting was unfamiliar, the postmark from Denver. "Thank you, Reverend," August said. "Will you stay for tea? You must be chilled through." While August escorted the minister to the kitchen, Brielle took the letter to the study to read in private. Breaking the seal, she unfolded the single sheet of paper inside and began to read. "Dear Mrs. Winters, you do not know me, but I feel I know you through the letters my late husband kept. My name is Margaret Holloway, wife now widow of Edward Holloway. I write to inform you that Edward passed away last month from apoplexy. In settling his affairs, I discovered notes regarding a debt owed by your late husband, Charles Winters. It appears Edward attempted to collect this debt from you a second time, despite it having been satisfied through your indenture contract. Please accept my sincerest apologies for my husband's dishonesty." To make amends, I am enclosing a bank draft for $200, the amount he falsely claimed you still owed. I hope this small restitution brings you some peace and security. I understand from town gossip that you are to marry August Langston. He is known to be a good and honorable man. I wish you both every happiness. Respectfully, Margaret Holloway. True to her word, Mrs. Holloway had included a bank draft made out to Brielle. $200, a substantial sum that represented freedom from the last shadow of her past. August found her still staring at the letter, tears streaming down her face. "Brielle," he asked, alarmed. "What's wrong? Bad news?" She shook her head, handing him the letter and the bank draft. "Not bad news, just unexpected." August read quickly, his expression changing from concern to surprise. "Well," he said finally, "it seems Holloway's widow has more honor than he ever did." "What should I do with it?" Brielle asked, nodding toward the bank draft. "It feels wrong somehow to profit from his death." August considered this. "It's not profit, it's restitution for a wrong done to you, but if it troubles you, perhaps you could use it for something meaningful." An idea formed in Brielle's mind. "What about a trust for James, for his education someday?" August smiled approvingly. "That's perfect. We'll open an account at the bank in his name." "We," Brielle repeated, savoring the word. "It still seems like a dream sometimes that we're to be a family." "Not a dream," August assured her, pulling her and James into a gentle embrace. "The most real thing I've ever known." Reverend Miller departed after tea, promising to return for the wedding ceremony. As the sun began to set, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold, Brielle stood at the window of the parlor, James dozing against her shoulder, watching August walk the minister to his horse. She thought about the strange twist of fate that had brought her to this moment, from the humiliation of the auction block to the threshold of a new life, as August Langston's wife. Perhaps there was a grand design at work, or perhaps it was simply that good sometimes emerged from the worst circumstances, like wildflowers blooming after a prairie fire. Whatever forces had shaped their path, Brielle was certain of one thing. The future that stretched before them was bright with promise, a future built on choice rather than necessity, on love rather than obligation. And for that, she was profoundly grateful. Christmas Eve arrived with a perfect blanket of fresh snow that transformed the ranch into a winter wonderland. Inside the house, pine boughs and red ribbons adorned the mantels, and candles glowed in every window. The rich aromas of roasting turkey and cinnamon, spiced apple pies filled the air as Brielle and Sarah prepared the wedding feast. In the bedroom that would soon be hers to share with August, Brielle stood before the mirror, hardly recognizing the woman who gazed back at her. She wore a gown of ivory satin trimmed with delicate lace, a gift from August that had arrived by special courier from Denver the week before. Her honey-brown hair was arranged in a simple but elegant knot, adorned with a sprig of holly with bright red berries. "You look like an angel, Mrs. Winters," Sarah said, fastening the last button at the back of the gown. "Mr. Langston is going to be struck speechless." Brielle smiled at the girl's enthusiasm. "Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for all your help today. I couldn't have managed without you." A soft knock at the door announced the arrival of Mrs. Patterson, the shopkeeper's wife, who had volunteered to care for James during the ceremony. "Oh my," she exclaimed, clapping her hands together. "Aren't you a vision? And here's the little gentleman, all ready for his mama's big day." James, dressed in a tiny suit that August had commissioned from the town tailor, gurgled happily from his cradle. At nearly 8 months old, he was now sitting confidently, attempting to crawl and babbling an ever-expanding vocabulary of sounds. "Come here, sweet boy," Brielle said, lifting him into her arms for a cuddle. "You be good for Mrs. Patterson, all right. Mama has a very important promise to make today." James patted her cheek with a chubby hand as if giving his blessing, then went willingly to Mrs. Patterson. "We'll be waiting downstairs," the older woman said with a wink. "Don't keep your groom waiting too long, dear." After they left, Brielle took one last look around the room that had been hers alone for the past 6 months. Tomorrow she would move her belongings to the master bedroom across the hall, August's room, soon to be their shared sanctuary. The thought sent a thrill of nervous anticipation through her. Taking a deep breath, she picked up the small bouquet of winter roses August had procured from somewhere she suspected Denver and made her way downstairs. The ranch hands and a handful of townspeople had gathered in the parlor, which had been transformed for the occasion. Reverend Miller waited by the hearth, Bible in hand, and beside him stood August. Brielle's breath caught at the sight of him. August wore a black suit that emphasized his broad shoulders, his dark hair neatly combed, his usually weathered face freshly shaven. But it was his expression as he turned and saw her that stole her heart, anew a look of such wonder and love that she felt tears pricking at her eyes. Someone, perhaps one of the ranch hands who had once played in a saloon, began a halting version of a wedding march on a battered piano in the corner. The assembled guests turned to watch as Brielle descended the last few steps and walked slowly across the room to where August waited. "You are so beautiful," he whispered as she reached his side. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Miller began, his voice ringing out in the hushed room. "We are gathered here in the sight of God and these witnesses to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. When it came time for the vows, August took Brielle's hands in his voice strong and clear as he promised to love, honor, and cherish her all the days of his life. Brielle's own voice trembled slightly as she made the same promises in return, her heart so full it seemed it might burst. "By the authority vested in me by the territory of Colorado, I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Miller declared. "August, you may kiss your bride." August's kiss was gentle but full of promise, appropriate for the company they kept yet conveying all the depth of his feelings. When they turned to face their guests as Mr. and Mrs. August Langston, the small gathering erupted in applause. The celebration that followed was joyous and relaxed. The dining table groaned under the weight of the wedding feast: turkey and ham, potatoes and fresh bread, pies and cakes, and a special wedding cake sent as a gift from the town baker. Wine flowed freely, and even the most taciturn of the ranch hands joined in offering toasts to the happy couple. James passed from arms to arms among the guests who all wanted to hold the handsome baby, eventually grew overtired and fussy. August noticed before Brielle did and quietly took the child from Mrs. Patterson. "I'll put him down," he told Brielle, kissing her cheek. "Enjoy your party. I'll be back in a moment." The simple domestic act, performed without fanfare or expectation of praise, touched Brielle deeply. This was the man she had married, one who saw what needed doing and simply did it, whether it was running a cattle ranch or comforting a cranky baby. The party continued until well after dark, with the last guests departing around 10 o'clock. The ranch hands returned to the bunkhouse, and Sarah and Mrs. Patterson helped clean up before taking their leave, both hugging Brielle and offering whispered congratulations and good wishes for her wedding night. Then, suddenly, the house was quiet. Brielle stood in the parlor, now restored to order though still festive with its Christmas decorations, feeling a strange mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. She was a wife again, August's wife, and the reality of that was just beginning to sink in. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Langston," August said from the doorway, the new name sending a pleasant shiver down her spine. "I was just thinking how quickly life can change," she admitted. "This time last year I was alone and afraid, waiting for James to be born, not knowing what the future held." August crossed the room to stand before her, taking her hands in his. "And now I'm happier than I ever dreamed possible," she said honestly, "because of you." August raised her hands to his lips, kissing each one tenderly. "I've had the papers drawn up," he said quietly. "For James's adoption, if that's what you want." Fresh tears welled in Brielle's eyes. "You would do that, legally claim him as your own." "He already is my own in every way that matters," August said simply. "I love him as if he were born of my blood. The papers just make it official for the world." Brielle threw her arms around his neck, overcome with emotion. "Thank you," she whispered against his shoulder, "for everything, for saving us that day, for being the man you are." August held her close, his strong arms a haven she had come to treasure. "You saved me too," he murmured into her hair, "from loneliness, from a life half-lived." They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other's embrace, the only sound the crackling of the fire and the distant howl of a coyote somewhere on the snow-covered plains. Finally, August drew back slightly, his blue eyes dark with an emotion Brielle had glimpsed but never fully seen until now. "It's late," he said softly, "and it's been a long day." Understanding his unspoken question, Brielle nodded. "Yes," she agreed, "we should go upstairs." Hand in hand, they climbed the staircase, pausing at the nursery to check on James, who slept peacefully in his new bed, unaware of the momentous changes in his young life. Then August led Brielle across the hall to what was now their bedroom. A fire burned low in the hearth, casting a warm glow over the large four-poster bed with its fresh linens. Someone, Sarah, most likely had placed a vase of winter roses on the dresser, their sweet scent perfuming the air. "I'll give you some privacy," August said, gesturing toward a screen in the corner. "To change." Grateful for his consideration, Brielle nodded and moved behind the screen, where she found a nightgown of fine white cotton laid out for her. Her fingers trembled slightly as she unbuttoned her wedding gown, remembering her first wedding night with Charles, awkward and slightly painful, though he had tried to be gentle. But this was different. She was different. And August was certainly different from Charles, more patient, more attentive, more aware of her as a person rather than a possession. When she emerged from behind the screen, August had removed his jacket and tie but was otherwise still dressed. He stood by the fire, his expression softening as he took in her appearance. "You don't have to be nervous," he said quietly. "We have all the time in the world." The simple statement eased some of the tension from Brielle's shoulders. "I'm not nervous exactly," she said, moving to stand before him. It's been a long time, and with James, my body is different now." August reached out to touch her cheek. "You are perfect," he said with such conviction that she couldn't help but believe him. "But if you're not ready, I am," she assured him, placing her hand over his. "I want to be your wife in every way." The look that passed between them was filled with a promise of things to come, not just this night, but all the nights and days that would follow. A lifetime of building something together, of creating a family and a home, of facing whatever challenges the frontier might bring with the strength of their shared love. As August lowered his head to kiss her, Brielle felt the last of her reservations melt away. This was right. This was where she belonged. In the arms of the man who had bid for her when no one else would, who had seen value in her when the rest of the world had turned away. Outside, snow began to fall again, silent and soft in the Christmas night. But inside the master bedroom of the Langston ranch house, a warmth bloomed that had nothing to do with the fire in the hearth, and everything to do with the love between a man and a woman who had found each other against all odds. Spring came early to the Colorado rangeland that year, the snow melting to reveal tender green shoots and wildflowers dotting the rolling hills. The Langston ranch hummed with activity as calving season began, bringing new life and renewed purpose to everyone on the property. Brielle, now 4 months pregnant with her and August's first child together, watched from the porch as her husband led James on a gentle pony in the corral. At 13 months old, James was walking confidently, his vocabulary expanding daily and his attachment to August growing ever stronger. "Papa," he called, his face alight with joy as August guided the pony in a small circle. "Papa, look, I see you, partner," August called back, his own face reflecting the boy's delight. "You're a natural horseman." The sight of them together never failed to warm Brielle's heart. The adoption papers had been finalized in February, officially making James a Langston. August had insisted on the boy taking his name, wanting no distinction between James and any future children they might have. And now, with another Langston growing beneath her heart, Brielle felt a sense of completeness she had never known was possible. The morning sickness that had plagued her first weeks of pregnancy had finally subsided, leaving her with renewed energy and a deep contentment. Mrs. Langston, a voice called, drawing her attention to a wagon approaching the house. It was Sarah, returning from town with supplies and mail. The girl, now a permanent fixture at the ranch, had become almost like family over the winter months. "Good afternoon, Sarah," Brielle greeted her, descending the porch steps. "How was town? Busy with spring traders," Sarah replied, handing down a stack of letters and parcels. "And there's news a railroad spur is coming to Redemption Creek by next year. Everyone's talking about it. A railroad." Brielle repeated, surprised. "That would certainly change things around here. Mr. Patterson says it'll bring more settlers, more business," Sarah continued, climbing down from the wagon. "Oh, and Reverend Miller asked after you and the baby. I told him you were blooming like a spring rose." Brielle laughed at the girl's exuberance. "That's very poetic, Sarah, thank you." "Is that Sarah I hear?" August called, leading James and the pony back to the barn. "Did you remember those fence staples I needed?" "Yes, sir, Mr. Langston," Sarah replied, "and those special seeds Mrs. Langston wanted for the kitchen garden." August lifted James from the pony's back and set him down. The boy immediately ran to Brielle, arms outstretched. "Mama, I rode pony." "I saw you, my brave boy," Brielle said, bending carefully to hug him. "You were magnificent." August joined them, one hand automatically going to the small of Brielle's back in a protective gesture that had become second nature since learning of her pregnancy. "How are you feeling today?" he asked softly, his concern evident in the lines around his eyes. "Wonderful," Brielle assured him. "Truly, the fresh air is doing me good." Relief washed over his face. "Good. I was thinking we might ride out to the north pasture after dinner, all of us. The wildflowers are spectacular this year." "That sounds lovely," Brielle agreed. "Oh, we have mail." She handed him several letters addressed to him, keeping one that bore her name. August glanced at his correspondence. "Business can wait," he decided. "Let's get these supplies unloaded first." As August and Sarah attended to the wagon, Brielle opened her letter, curious about who might be writing to her. The return address was from Denver, and for a moment she feared it might be bad news from Mrs. Holloway, but the letter was from someone else entirely, a Mrs. Eleanor Harding, who identified herself as the headmistress of a small academy for girls in Denver. "Dear Mrs. Langston," the letter began. "Your name has been brought to my attention by Reverend Miller of Redemption Creek, who speaks most highly of your character and your previous experience as a schoolteacher. Our academy is expanding, and we find ourselves in need of a correspondence teacher who could prepare lessons for our students in literature and composition." The letter went on to explain that the position would not require Brielle to leave her home, but would involve designing curricula and reviewing students' work by mail. The compensation offered was generous and the hours flexible. "Is everything all right?" August asked, returning to find Brielle staring at the letter with a surprised expression. "Yes," she said slowly. "More than all right, actually. I've been offered a teaching position of sorts from a girls' academy in Denver." She handed him the letter, watching his face as he read. "This sounds like a wonderful opportunity," he said when he finished. "If it's something you want to do." "You wouldn't mind?" Brielle asked, slightly taken aback by his immediate support. "It would take some time away from my duties here." August's expression grew serious. "Brielle, you're my wife, not my housekeeper. I didn't marry you for your cooking or cleaning skills, impressive though they are." He took her hands in his. "Your mind is one of the things I love most about you. If teaching even from a distance would make you happy, then I'm all for it." Tears of gratitude pricked at Brielle's eyes. "I do miss teaching," she admitted, "and the extra income would be nice for the Children's Education Fund." "Then you should accept," August said simply. "We'll make it work. Sarah can take on more household duties if needed." James, who had been investigating a ladybug crawling on the porch step, looked up at his parents. "Mama teach?" he asked, his expression curious. "That's right, sweetheart," Brielle told him, bending to his level. "Mama might teach other children through letters." James considered this seriously, then nodded. "Mama's smart," he declared with the absolute confidence of a toddler, causing both Brielle and August to laugh. "Out of the mouths of babes," August said, ruffling the boy's dark hair. He's absolutely right. You are the smartest woman I've ever known. Later that evening, after James was tucked into bed and the house had grown quiet, Brielle sat at her desk in the study, composing her acceptance letter to Mrs. Harding. August lounged in the armchair by the fire, reading one of his agricultural journals but occasionally glancing up to watch her. "You look happy," he observed during one such moment. Brielle set down her pen and smiled at him. "I am happy, completely and utterly." August set aside his journal and held out his hand to her. "Come here." She rose and crossed the room, allowing him to pull her gently onto his lap, mindful of her growing belly. His hand came to rest protectively over the swell where their child grew. "When I saw you on that auction block," he said quietly, looking so brave despite everything, holding James like he was the most precious thing in the world, "I knew." "Knew what?" Brielle asked, leaning her head against his shoulder. "That you were special. That you deserved so much more than life had given you." His voice grew husky with emotion. "I didn't plan to bid that day. I'd just come to town for supplies, but then no one raised a hand for you and I couldn't bear it. Couldn't bear the thought of what might happen to you and that baby." "So you saved us," Brielle murmured, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. August shook his head. "No, love, you saved yourself with your courage and dignity. I just provided a place for you to land." "And what a landing it's been," Brielle said with a soft laugh. "From indentured servant to rancher's wife in less than a year. To teacher, mother, and the heart of this home," August added. "You've brought light back to this place, Brielle, to me." She kissed him then, a tender expression of the love that had grown between them through winter storms and spring renewals, through quiet evenings by the fire and busy days of ranch work. A love built on respect, mutual care, and the shared joy of raising James together. "We should get some rest," August said when they finally broke apart. "Tomorrow's going to be busy with the new calves." Brielle nodded, allowing him to help her to her feet. As they climbed the stairs together, hand in hand, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here from the depths of despair on that auction block to the heights of happiness in August's arms. Life on the frontier was never easy. There would be challenges ahead: harsh winters, drought summers, the everyday trials of raising children in a still wild land. But with August beside her, Brielle faced the future without fear. They had found each other against impossible odds, creating a family and a home where love flourished like wildflowers after a spring rain. And as they reached the top of the stairs, August paused to kiss her once more, his blue eyes filled with a promise that needed no words, that whatever life brought their way, they would face it together. Always together. 5 years later, the Langston Ranch had grown and prospered beyond anyone's expectations. The railroad had indeed come to Redemption Creek, bringing new settlers, new businesses, and new opportunities for the entire region. August had expanded his cattle operation, adding sheep and horses to diversify the ranch's income. Brielle's position with the Denver Girls Academy had evolved into a respected career, her literature curriculum now used by several schools across Colorado Territory. She balanced her teaching work with the joys and demands of motherhood, as their family had grown to include Thomas, now 4 and 1-year-old Elizabeth, in addition to James, who at 6 was the spitting image of August in miniature. On a warm September afternoon, Brielle sat on the porch, watching her children play in the yard. James, serious and responsible even at his young age, was showing Thomas how to lasso a fence post, while Elizabeth tottered after butterflies in the garden, her chubby legs still unsteady. "Mama, look." James called, successfully looping his small rope around the post. "Just like Papa showed me." "Well done, sweetheart," Brielle called back, her heart swelling with pride. The sound of hoofbeats announced August's return from the north pasture. He dismounted gracefully, despite the long day's work, and swung Elizabeth up into his arms as she abandoned her butterflies to run toward him. "There's my princess," he said, kissing her rosy cheek. "Were you helping Mama today?" Elizabeth nodded solemnly, her dark curls bouncing. "Help Mama cookies," she declared. "Did you save one for Papa?" August asked, carrying her toward the porch. 2 cookies, Papa, Elizabeth confirmed, holding up 2 fingers. August laughed, the sound carrying across the yard. At 35, he was in his prime, confident, successful, and more handsome than ever, with streaks of silver beginning to appear at his temples. The years of marriage and fatherhood had softened some of his rough edges while strengthening the core of who he was, a man of integrity, compassion, and unwavering devotion to his family. "How are my boys?" he called to James and Thomas, who abandoned their lassoing to race toward him. "I got it 3 times, Papa," James reported proudly, "and I've been teaching Thomas just like you asked." "That's my man," August said, ruffling James's dark hair. "Teaching is the best way to master something yourself." He climbed the porch steps, Elizabeth still in his arms, and bent to kiss Brielle. "And how's my beautiful wife today? Wonderful now that you're home," she replied truthfully. Even after 5 years of marriage, the sight of August returning to her still made her heart beat faster. "I have news," he said, settling beside her on the porch swing, Elizabeth in his lap. The boys scrambled up to sit at their feet, always eager for their father's stories. "The railroad agent was at the North Pasture today. They want to buy 20 acres of our land for a new depot." "Are you considering it?" Brielle asked, knowing how protective August was of the Langston legacy. "For the price they're offering, absolutely," August confirmed. "It's the far corner of the property, mostly scrub anyway. And having a depot that close would make shipping our cattle and wool much more efficient." "Sounds like good business," Brielle agreed, "though I hope it doesn't mean more people traipsing across our property." August chuckled. "Already thought of that. Part of the deal is a proper fence line and a private siding just for Langston shipments." "Will we see the trains, Papa?" James asked, his eyes bright with excitement. "From the North Ridge, you probably will," August told him. "Maybe next spring, I'll take you boys up there to watch them lay the track." Thomas clapped his hands in delight at the prospect, while James nodded seriously, already planning the expedition in his mind. "And that's not all," August continued, his expression growing more serious as he looked at Brielle. "I had a letter from the governor's office today. They're establishing a territorial board of education, and your name has been put forward as a potential member." Brielle stared at him in shock. "Me, but that would be a significant position." "One you're more than qualified for," August said firmly. "Your curricula are already being used in schools across Colorado. Who better to help shape educational standards for the territory?" "But the children," Brielle began, glancing at her brood. "The house, the ranch will all continue to function," August assured her. "The board meets only quarterly in Denver. We can arrange for you to attend those meetings. The rest of the work can be done by correspondence, just like your teaching." Brielle felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation at the prospect. "You really think I could do this?" "I know you can," August said with absolute conviction, "and so do you if you're honest with yourself." She looked at her husband, this man who had never once tried to limit her, who had encouraged her to pursue her teaching even as they built their family, who had always treated her as an equal partner rather than a possession. "I'll consider it," she promised. "It would be an honor to serve if they truly want me." "They'd be fools not to," August said, leaning over to kiss her forehead. "Now, I believe someone mentioned cookies." Elizabeth perked up immediately. "Cookies, Mama, cookies for Papa." Laughing, Brielle rose to lead her family inside for the promised treat. As they gathered around the kitchen table, August at one end, she at the other, their 3 beautiful children between them, she marveled at how far they had come from that desperate day on the auction block. From that moment of deepest humiliation had sprung this life of purpose, love, and respect. The baby no one had wanted was now a bright, capable boy with his father's name and a future full of promise. The woman no one had bid for was now a respected educator, a beloved wife, and the mother of 3, and the cowboy who had stepped forward when no one else would. He had become the center of her world, the anchor in every storm, the partner in every joy. August caught her eye across the table and smiled, the love in his gaze as fresh and true as it had been on their wedding day. "What are you thinking about so seriously, Mrs. Langston?" he asked, passing Thomas a napkin for his milk mustache. "Just how blessed we are," Brielle replied. "How one moment can change everything." August nodded, understanding immediately what she meant. "Best $100 I ever spent," he said with a wink. "Papa bought Mama?" Elizabeth asked, confusion crinkling her tiny brow as she picked up the adult's exchange. The question hung in the air for a moment, a reminder of the complicated truth at the heart of their beginning. Brielle looked to August, wondering how he would address it. "No, sweetheart," August said gently. "Papa didn't buy Mama." Papa recognized how special Mama was when other people couldn't see it, and then we fell in love and built our family together. James, old enough to have heard whispers in town about his mother's past, looked up with serious eyes. "Is that true, Mama, about the auction?" Brielle reached across the table to take her eldest son's hand. "Yes, James. After your first father died, we had no money, no home. The auction was a way for me to work off debts. Your father, Papa, offered me a position here at the ranch." "And then he fell in love with you," Thomas interjected confidently. "Like in the stories." "Exactly like in the stories," August confirmed, his gaze holding Brielle's. "Your mother is the bravest, strongest, most beautiful woman I've ever known. I thank God every day that I happened to be in town that afternoon." "Me too," James said solemnly. "Otherwise we wouldn't be Langstons." "And I wouldn't have my brothers and sister," Thomas added. "And cookies," Elizabeth concluded with perfect toddler logic, making everyone laugh. As the conversation moved on to other topics, James's school projects, Thomas's new pony, the upcoming harvest festival in town, Brielle felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. They had faced the truth of their beginning with their children as they would face all of life's challenges, together with honesty and love. Later that night, after the children were asleep and the house had grown quiet, Brielle and August stood on the porch, looking out at the vast expanse of land that was their legacy. The stars scattered across the Colorado sky seemed close enough to touch, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of pine and sage. "I've been thinking," August said, his arm around her waist, "about what you said earlier, about how one moment can change everything." Brielle leaned against his solid warmth, content. "Do you ever wonder what might have happened if I hadn't been in town that day, if someone else had bid for you?" Brielle considered the question seriously. "Sometimes. But then I look at our life, our children, this home we've built together, and I can't imagine any other path." August nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I believe we would have found each other somehow, even if it had been a different day, a different circumstance. Some things are just meant to be." "August Langston," Brielle teased, turning in his arms to face him. "Are you becoming philosophical in your old age?" He laughed, the sound rich in the night air. 35 is hardly old, Mrs. Langston, but yes, perhaps I am. Fatherhood does that to a man. Makes him think about destiny and purpose." "And what is your purpose, Mr. Langston?" Brielle asked, tracing the familiar contours of his face with her fingertips. "To love you," he said simply. "To raise our children well, to leave this land better than I found it." He paused, then added with a smile, "And to convince you to accept that board position. You were born to help shape the future of education in this territory." Brielle laughed softly. "You're very persistent." "One of my better qualities," August agreed, "along with my excellent judgment in wives." He lowered his head to kiss her, a kiss as tender and passionate as their first, filled with the depth of feeling that had grown between them over the years. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Brielle rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I'll accept the position," she decided, "if it's formally offered." "It will be," August said confidently, "and you'll be brilliant." They stood together a moment longer, savoring the quiet beauty of the night before turning to go inside. As August closed the door behind them, securing their home against the wilderness beyond, Brielle felt the familiar wave of gratitude that often overcame her at unexpected moments. From the auction block to this, a life rich with purpose, love, and possibility. A journey that had begun in humiliation and fear had led to this place of profound joy and fulfillment. And at the center of it all was August Langston, the cowboy who had stepped forward when no one else would, offering not just a bid but a future, not just a contract but his heart. As they climbed the stairs to their bedroom, hands linked as they had been each night for 5 years, Brielle knew with absolute certainty that no matter what challenges lay ahead, board meetings in Denver, children growing up too quickly, the ever-changing frontier around them, they would face it all together, their love a constant in an ever-shifting world. And in the quiet of their bedroom, with moonlight streaming through the window and the sounds of their sleeping children in the rooms nearby, they renewed once more the promise that had begun that fateful day in Redemption Creek, a promise of love, respect, and partnership that would endure for all the days of their lives.